And I'd like to start with Mr. Gopinath, who was part of a tour of Pakistan in the 1950s, along with being part of the first ever test win in 1952. And just talk to him about what has changed over the years. How does he see the game now compared to what it was in his time?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a question which would take a long time to explain. To put it in a nutshell, cricket today is totally and completely different to the cricket that was played in my time, which is almost 50 years ago. I don't think any cricketer here was even born at that time. And the conditions of playing cricket at that time was so completely different. And this is where I always feel comparing performances of that period to what happens today is totally unfair, because there is really no comparison. Even more so, your 2020 game. In fact, when I was in England when this 2020 was started and we happened to be discussing with a whole lot of old cricketers, the suggestion was, it's a great game, it's very exciting to watch, but please don't call it cricket, give it another name. Like, it's another game. It's the cricket rules probably, some of them, not all of them. So it's a different game altogether.
And you stayed in a railway carriage, didn't you, at one of the venues? You stayed in a railway carriage, didn't you?
Yes. Pakistan too, I mean, this is another part of the game, although it was not in the game itself. We would, in one place, I forget the name of the place, there was no hotel there. There was nowhere one could live or stay. And for 4 days, we had to stay in a railway siding in railway compartments. When we played those days, the cricket board had so little money that quite often all the players were billeted. I don't know if some of you would even know what billeting is, in the sense that all the players stayed with different families because we couldn't afford, the board didn't have enough money to put up players in a hotel. Doesn't matter 5-star, but just a hotel was not possible. And when you stayed in homes, some were fortunate, they had a lot of space and time, and some were not so fortunate. So one had to accept that as part of the game, and you only saw the team when you went to the ground.
My other favorite story of cricket in the 60s, this was told to me by Bishan Bedi, is that you were given 50 rupees a day as allowance. And they once beat New Zealand in 4 days of a 5-day test match, so their 5th day's pay was cut.
But quite honestly, at that point of time, we were thrilled with this 50 rupees because we didn't ask, or we didn't feel that we need to be paid to play for the country.
It must have been something different, isn't it? I can understand the 50 rupees, that's the monetary side of it, but living on a train for 4 days to play a test match, and then living with families. So it must have been really something which we cannot think of or even hear of. How was it playing the game then? As far as I remember, probably from 83, since the World Cup India won, that's when we started following cricket very closely. So you see the great Kapil Dev, Ravi, Gavaskar, Mohinder, all the players who've played over the years. And as far as our memories go, would be since the World Cup 1983, and then came in our era, where I think we were lucky to play cricket in this era in terms of everything, in terms of facilities, in terms of finances, in terms of the way we were looked after. And we were pretty sure that we were not living in a train before a test match.
In my own case, I've had to cry off. I mean, today it's something you cannot even imagine. I had to cry off a test match in India because my company said they could not spare me at that time. So I had to refuse to play this match because other guys were on leave or something, and the company said, sorry, you can't go.
Ravi, by the time you came in 81, it'd been 10 years since India won in England and the West Indies. Things had changed by then. There were new heroes. India had started winning, at least consistently at home. But what change do you observe from your generation to, say, Saurav's, by which time we'd started winning abroad as well?
Well, I thought it was a huge change, and not just an ordinary change. You know, I've heard the conversation now for the last 20 minutes. I believe whatever progress cricket has to make, it's relative. It's meant to be. It's the generations you live with. You look at life, the way life is changing. You know, for an ordinary human being, the same way the game of cricket has changed. So it's all relative. You know, 81, when I made my test match debut, to 91, when I finished my cricket career, 92, as a test match player, there were changes. And there were some great changes that happened in the 90s because of television exploding into India, multinationals coming into India to sponsor the game. Now that doesn't change because the board of control for cricket in India want to change it. It changes because someone at the top in the government has changed some economic policies that help the game of cricket. You didn't play for the money because no amount of cricket that you played in the 80s, you couldn't live off that money. You had to do something where it gave you a good job, it gave you a good standing in society, and you use those kind of opportunities that you get to sustain your life. I think the biggest change came in the 90s when television exploded. And I'm a classic example of that. I got $200 for my last test match. If I'd played 1 year later, it would have been $2,500. You know, I remember sleeping in a train. And just because I couldn't fit into that compartment. You know, we were traveling from Mumbai to Patna for an inter-university game. And we used to carry our beddings. It was second class or third class, as you would say, in a train. And I couldn't sit. You know, there was no space in the, on that sleeper area because there were other players as well. So I used to roll out my bedding on the passage where people would move to go to the loo or things of that sort, and sleep and have the most peaceful sleep of my life, which no 7-star hotel gave me as an Indian player. So, you know, there again, it's relative. You know, you had the hunger. You didn't forget what you did. And when you were batting 90, 95 against the best in the world, you said, bloody hell, I want to get this 100, and I want to get plenty more. You know, like I mentioned, the bucks that have come into the game because of T20 cricket, it's fantastic because the game needed a kick on its backside. It needed some adrenaline. You know, it needed an injection, contrary to what a lot of people would like to say. It helps the game to evolve. I just hope that money is put to right use, you know, to promote first-class cricket, promote facilities, infrastructure, as regards, you know, the game is concerned, and to give opportunities to more and more people, you know, from outside the metros to come out and play the game. So
when I came in the squad in 1996, and I was young, I was trying to make a place for myself, we would go overseas, and we could see a feeling among the people that okay, they're a good individual side, they'll have some quality players, like Tendulkar was a big name then, Azhar was playing for India, he was the name in world cricket. People felt that, you know, there are players who would get runs, players who would get hundreds, but India will not win as a side against good, tough oppositions overseas, whether in Australia or England, South Africa. The West Indies had got slightly weaker then in the 96 than than they were in Ravi's time. Not a slightly, a lot weaker by 96. So, you know, as a team, we wanted to make that change. Wanted to find a way how we could play better overseas because we were a very good side at home. We had the spinners at home. who would topple sides, and when you look at the other oppositions, when they would come to India, they wouldn't play so well on Indian pitches with the ball turning, which has also been a massive improvement of touring sides in India. You look at South Africa, you look at England, maybe Australia. I'm not too sure how good their side at the present moment, but you look at England and South Africa, they come and play well in Indian conditions because they've got used to it. And as a generation, we realize that if we have to be a good side, we have to do well there. And it's a mental change which needed to come in, valuing performances overseas, rewarding performances overseas. We got a set up, and I'll be honest, when I came in 96, I was there for a short while previously in 91, 92. It was a different culture in 96, and we got the fitness culture back in the year 2000. We got trainers, a bit more professional setup, because the BCCI had a bit more money which could be spent on cricket, and a cultural change. The reason why we got an overseas coach was to see how we could win overseas, and if we knew something more which we didn't, to play well outside the subcontinent. And also I think we were blessed in a period of some exceptional players. Sachin Tendulkar, Rahul Dravid, Anil Kumble, Virender Sehwag, Harbhajan Singh at his best, Yuvraj Singh in one-day cricket, young Zahir Khan who would bowl quick. So we were blessed with with a lot of quality players who made the difference.
As a broadcaster, once I'd finished the game, as a viewer from the outside, I think the most defining moments that changed Indian cricket in a big way was the two series against Australia. Saurav led in one, and I think it was Azhar who led in the one before that, when Mark Taylor was the captain. And the cricket was, as exciting as you could ever imagine. The pace of the game was such, especially in that Saurav series, when they beat Australia and coming from behind after losing the first test, Lakshman Dravid partnership, then winning in Chennai. I think that transformed the entire nation's view to, it suddenly became like a kind of a glamour game.
That knock of Dravid and Lakshman at Kolkata. I've seen a lot of cricket around the world. I've been part of Indian team for over a long period. I've not seen better test knocks under pressure. I'm sure they've got hundreds overseas. Rahul's got a lot of runs overseas, so has Sachin, myself, or VVS. But that knock, that partnership on day 3, day 4 at Kolkata, I think that changed Indian cricket. That got the belief, because we were up against a very good Australian side who wanted to win. They had all departments covered: fast bowling, spin, batting. And to come from behind, we were down and out after the first innings at Kolkata. We were behind, we were asked to follow on. And I think that changed Indian cricket and got the belief, which is so important. Then we started touring, started playing well overseas, and went to England in 2002, played well there. So obviously it just was an upward curve for over a good period of 10, 11 years till we went to England this time.
I can understand the difficulties. You don't have the troops. You don't have, in my opinion, good enough generalship, too defensive compared. And here I'd like to pay a tribute to Saurabh and also Rahul Dravid, who was, I think, contrary to what the stereotype, was a surprisingly active and aggressive captain. And Dhoni has done well, but today, without going into particular blaming individuals, I think we've fallen into a defensive mindset. Secondly, there's a long-term problem. I don't know what to do about it. It seems to be systemic. Our priorities, we don't have our priorities right, and this has become a structural weakness. We've got to overcome it, because our recent priorities have been skewed. Test cricket still important, but getting nothing like the top priority it gets in England, Australia, and South Africa. Surely there's an economics to it. I understand it, but this needs to be set right. We must demand and get 5 test series against the top teams in India as well as abroad. I don't know how the schedules will work out. It is a challenge, and I think we have to get it. Secondly, to come back to Pataudi's favorite point, something I think more than any other contemporary, and possibly more than any top cricketer since, Tiger disapproved of Indian pitches. He had learnt all his cricket in England. When he came here, he disapproved of it. Not the usual argument that you shouldn't prepare pitches to suit your conditions, not at all. But pitches that do nothing for pace or movement, or do little for pace or movement. it's fine to play to your strengths, he argues there, as others do. And spin tracks obviously have their uses, but these days you find that almost invariably, when you're playing a top team, they have better spinners than you do. Cricket is a fine game, and Test cricket is a beautiful game. But there is a need to get some degree of equanimity or some kind of balance. And referring here to the mood of swings, the mood swings of Cricket India, the extreme elation, triumphalism and hyper-patriotism that accompany victory, and the exaggerated grief, rancor, carping, and loss of morale that are produced by defeat. This is an age-old problem in India. Indian history also is replete with this kind of problem. And again, I can only return to Tiger, who cautioned against treating cricket as some kind of proxy for national strength and prestige. It is a game, we love that game, particularly Test cricket, but we must educate the cricket-loving public we must do something about these mood swings, and I think you can do it through an awareness campaign.
I suspect that there is another element to it, and that's a psychological one. Because it seems to me that the authorities are sort of saying to themselves, it doesn't matter if we lose 4-0 in Australia, it doesn't matter if we lose 4-0 in England, because we know that in India we can win. And this current series has been significant, because for the first time, they've suddenly come up with the fact that, gosh, we can't win, even on our pitches. So now that it's probably not a bad thing that India lost, because I think we have been in
You know, we are hoping for it.
we have been in denial for some time, and I know Ravi is waiting to argue with me here, so I'll let him have the floor.
I think I'm not going to argue with you. In fact, it's the best thing that's happened, Suresh. Sometimes you need a kick up the backside, and where you're exposed as you were here, so that in the long run, you think ahead, you have the vision to see where you want to be 5 years, 6 years down the line. And I think the main thing the BCCI will have to focus on is domestic cricket and the quality of wickets. I mean, just see the scores that are coming out in the Ranji Trophy, which is ridiculous. It's like, 300s people are getting for breakfast. You got to earn those runs. You don't see a bowler's name, anywhere. So I think domestic cricket is the place where you've got to focus on, where you take the local associations out of making pitches. They should not be involved. There should be a committee in place. I'm sure there are enough groundsmen in the country that can do a good job. And the emphasis should be on tracks that afford everything to everyone who plays the game.
But I would like to ask you, because you were one of our leading spinners, over 100 wickets, where are our spinners? In the time that you played, and even in the time that Saurav played, every state side had a spinner who was good enough to play for the country. The number of spinners who haven't played for the country would make quite an interesting team of spinners, world-class spinners.
See, there again, it goes with the pitches. I think you've got to be careful how you groom the spinners. I think there's a lot of limited overs cricket. You've got to be very, very careful of 2020 cricket. If you see a quality spinner, who you feel can play the longer version of the game, keep him away from 2020 cricket. Make him play first-class cricket as much as he can, till he learns his trade and then has the experience, and the wherewithal and the mental side of it to cope even with 2020 cricket. But the problem is here that you have to play it. It's part of your life. It's part of the fabric at the moment. And that is the problem. Now, how you strike the right balance, in selection, in educating the young spinner, so that he doesn't feel bad that he's not playing 2020 cricket and not making the bucks, rather than telling him that your time will come to make twice that much money if you can just enhance your reputation as a test match player in the longer version of the game.
In fact, it's like everything else. A change is always going to take place. As you all know, the one constant thing in life is change. Now, over the years, Australia have ruled the roost, then it moves on to England. For a time, the West Indians were on top. It is going to change. It's like a wheel of fortune. No country can expect to be on the top all the time and expect all the other countries just to be walked over. This is, if we expect that, it's not going to happen.
Do you agree with what Mr. Gopinath said about the circle of life and ups and downs? I think you've been through them in your career as well.
Absolutely, and I'm amazed with what he said, and I've heard him very, very, very closely. He might have played his cricket in the 1950s, an olden day cricketer, but the thought processes are the same. It's just different years. Just we are born 50 years late, but it just amazes me to just listen to him and think that the game on the whole, the thinking of the game hasn't changed, and it's really been fantastic to hear you, sir. In the 1950s, I wasn't even born. So, and I agree with Ravi on the spinners. I think every cricketer, not just a spinner, Sir Mr. N. Ram was talking about Indian cricket's future. Every cricketer needs to be handled by a captain properly. And I think the success or the failure of any cricket side depends a lot on the captain. And I'm not taking anything away from the coaches, and with all due respect, a captain can make a cricketer and break it. So I think Indian cricket is at a point where that sort of responsibility, that sort of role needs to come in. We need to be patient with Indian cricket at the present moment. We will have failures because when a group of quality players go, it's not easy to recover very, very quickly. But as long as we play well, we compete well, I think as an Indian fan, we'll be happy. And talking about spinners and 2020 cricket, I don't know how you take people away from 2020 cricket these days. How do you deprive someone from the money he makes out of 2020 cricket, because finances are important. And I think at some stage the board will have to look at balancing the money, prioritize Test cricket, create a pool of money. The IPL money comes into a pool, and you pay it out according to the performances in Test cricket and different levels. It's easier said than done. I don't know how is it going to happen, because franchisee pressure is a lot. I've been in the IPL for 5 years. Franchisee pressure is a lot, and they want to win. They want the best player on their side, and they're ready to pay any amount of money.
Mr. Ramesh Ramakrishnan, could we invite him on stage to give away at least a copy of all the almanacs to all our distinguished guests on stage? Mr. Ramakrishnan, let's have a big hand for him, please. The first ever Wisden India Cricketers Almanac, and a copy for all the gentlemen on stage. Ms. Shaurav. That's a copy for him, but I think he's read it before. Ravi. Suresh will give you a copy later. Mr. Gopinath, wonderful to get. The last man standing of India's first Test win, a wonderful cricketer, and Mr. Ram, really distinguished journalist, great man. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and that was really, really wonderful. Hearing all the thoughts, hearing 4 generations speak is like something very special. I'd now like to invite the floor open for any questions from the audience. We have about 5 minutes of questions.
The question is directed to Saurav. What I want to understand is that you spoke about, well, everyone out here spoke about the pitches and the spinners. There are 2 things. One, that I was in Australia when India lost 4-0, and you were there too. Gautam Gambhir and MS Dhoni, to name a few, mentioned about how India should have spin-friendly tracks, just like Australia has pace-friendly tracks in Australia. How is it you're planning to do? How is it that we can change first the attitude of the players before we change the attitude of the BCCI to have, tracks which are very good for future use and that'll help us win abroad? That's one. And 2, we spoke about spinners. Australia did not have, did not create pitches that were spin-friendly in Australia to win in India.
I think that was more of a frustration than the real picture. I think these guys are tough inside. I know they've been battered a bit in the last 15, 16 months. As Mr. Gopinath said, it's a cycle which we are. We're probably at the downward trend of the cycle, and hopefully we'll get up quickly. Talk about Australia. I think they've won just once against us here, and they had a spinner who you don't get every day. Let's be honest, Shane Warne. You don't get a Shane Warne out of the textbook. You don't get a Shane Warne out of the coaching manual. I don't think many can coach and produce another Shane Warne. It's just, these are freaks. Warne, Murli, Kumble, and even Harbhajan Singh. I think he was a top-class bowler when he was at his best. Daniel Vittori. So you don't get these sort of bowlers every day. So I don't think it'll be fair to compare that era, because that era of Australian cricket produced a lot of quality players which you will not see coming up very often. But I agree that pitches are important. The reason why we need to prepare good pitches is because to find quality players. And the reason why, and the only way we can win overseas is by performing in tough batting conditions. And if we have to do that, we have to emulate conditions similar to here.
The fast bowling, none of you have touched this thing, and it's been really a point which has been troubling me for the long time, that Pakistan must be having the similar wickets that India has. Geographically, they are similar. But when Pakistan can produce bowlers who can bowl 150 from the first ball, we still haven't produced.
We've been trying to find an answer to that and find a fast bowler. I was with Shoaib Akhtar a couple of days ago in Delhi, and being with him is an entertainment. So, and I asked him that I saw Irfan Pathan, I believe that's his, Mohammad Irfan, on his on the first day in Bangalore, and I said, can we have him for us for the next 2-3 years, and then we'll give you back. But I don't know the reason why. How do they keep producing such fast bowlers? I don't know whether it's a case of role model. Dave Watmore is here somewhere at the back. He's having a quiet beer. So you can ask him that question, that how as a coach he finds fast bowlers for Pakistan. But I really don't know the question, because we have been trying. We did have a few. I'm not saying we didn't have it. Javak Al-Shrinath at his young age was quick. He could bowl 150, and he did that over a period of time. Zahir Khan, when he came in, bowled quick. Umesh Yadav has got pace, but the point which I cannot fathom is why does it drop over a period of 2-3 years? That's one answer I've never been able to find out.
I think it's the culture. Pakistan have produced fast bowlers, for the last 20-30 years. And in Imran, they got a fantastic role model, who educated. I'm not saying we've not had role models and we've not done enough. Okay, I'll put one step ahead. He did more than our guys could have done. And educating the likes of a Waqar or a Wasim, drilling in the kind of stuff that's needed for you to become a champion fast bowler. It's not just the kind of deliveries you bowl, it's the training, the work ethics that go into it, so that, like Saurabh mentioned, our guys come at 140, disappear to 130 in 12 months' time. How to sustain it, in fact, take it a notch higher after, say, 2-3 years of you being in the game. So I think, role models are very important, and once you identify someone, I think there'll be a lot more coming. With Zahir being at the forefront, I think he will have a lot to contribute.
But why is it that we still have a mindset to continue with foreign coaches? Don't we have enough talent in India? Don't we have enough expertise? Don't we have enough experience to handle the Indian players?
I completely agree with you. We need to have Indian coaches. And I think when we had foreign coaches early on, it was a change in thinking and culture we wanted to bring into Indian cricket. But I think at the present moment, and I'm dead sure that there's enough ability in this country, enough people in this country who can take Indian forward, if they're given as much as backing as you've done to the foreign coaches over the years, and I'm sure they can do a job, and I'm convinced with that. It was a period where we needed to do something different. I played in an era early on in '96 when we would have had different managers for different tours. There were no coaches then. Just a manager would be appointed. Next tour there would be someone. Next tour there would be someone. So when I became captain in 2000, I'd requested the BCCI that can we have one person over a period of time, because you travel so much, you're away for 8-9 months in a year, you need to get used to that person, and the person needs to get used to you, because it's a team culture.